Our News from the Hill segment tonight. Republicans are one step closer to major tax reform. The president released a framework last week which narrows the tax code into 3 brackets instead of 7, 12%, 25%, and 35%. Yet rumor has it on the Hill that some Republicans are looking to add a 4th bracket for the very, very wealthy, as high as our current highest tax rate of 39.5%. Other Republicans like Senator Rand Paul are already balking at the preliminary framework, saying it doesn't do enough to cut taxes even the way it's written now. Watch.
Business Insider shares that Paul cited an analysis by the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center that showed that taxes for a slew of middle-class Americans could increase over 10 years under the new framework. He took to social media writing, "This is a GOP tax plan? Possibly 30% of middle class gets a tax hike? I hope the final details are better than this." According to the report, the elimination of certain deductions in favor of doubling the standard deduction would eventually cause taxes for many people to increase.
With me now, Congressman from Florida's 1st District, Representative Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thanks for being on the show, sir.
Good to be back on, Liz.
All right, Congressman, let's talk about tax reform here. We only have the preliminary details of this, just the framework released by the White House. It's about 7 pages on a PDF document. We do know about the 3 tax brackets, 12%, 25%, 35%. Talk to me about what Senator Paul is saying, what he has been tweeting. He said that even with these tax cuts, these tax decreases, over the course of the next 10 years, something like 30% of the American middle class will face higher taxes if we use this framework. Do you agree with that?
Well, I like and respect Senator Paul a great deal, but it would be absolutely impossible for him to know that people would get a tax increase because we have not yet settled on what income levels would be taxed at the 3 simpler, fairer, reduced tax rates that are being contemplated under President Trump's blueprint. And so I believe Senator Paul may be a bit out in front of his skis on this one. And my expectation is that we will see taxes lowered for every American. And tax cuts can really be the rising water that covers the rocks and raises all of the boats for this economy. We've got to make sure that we get back to dynamic growth so that we can meet the great needs of the United States. And I think this tax bill and this tax framework present a bold option for us to do just that.
Well, listen, I certainly hope so. And I think this is an issue that transcends party lines here. The American people, Republican and Democrat, we all want our taxes to go down. I think perhaps Senator Paul's point, though, wasn't with the brackets. He wasn't saying that someone is going to be suffering a higher income tax bracket. He was saying with the elimination of the state deductions, that could cause people in states like here in California, cause the middle class to actually pay thousands of dollars extra in taxes because we get a pretty significant deduction for our state taxes.
Well, one of the things I like most about Senator Paul is that, like me, he's a believer in federalism. And in a federalist system, the states that have the better economic policies will ultimately do better. States like California and New York, who have high property taxes, will of course see less value than states like mine and Florida that have been cutting taxes for years. And so I suspect that the low tax states will have more economic growth under this tax plan. And just maybe under our federalist system, the states that are charging high taxes will actually see that that doesn't work. That drives businesses away, and they'll actually start to cut their taxes, align with the Trump agenda, and help move the country forward.
Well, I certainly hope so. It seems like California would have already noticed that if they were going to up in Sacramento at this point. But we'll have to wait and see. Congressman Gaetz, let me ask you this. There are some rumors on the Hill that there are certain Republicans who don't want to lower the highest tax bracket. It's currently at 39.5% for the very wealthy, that they don't want to lower that even to 35%. If this framework is adjusted in the bill and the highest tax rate is 39.5%, which would not be a cut in taxes for the very wealthy, is that something you could support?
Well, I want to cut taxes for every American. I think that tax reform ought to be something that benefits all people in this country so that we have more investor confidence, more consumer confidence. We see our markets improve, and we see the opportunities for all Americans continue to become more expansive and more accessible. And so that would be where I fall. But I think that there is a reasonable point being made that this has to be a tax cut that rescues the middle class in this country. We have seen the middle class hollowed out in America as a consequence of our tax policy, our regulatory policy, the anemic economic growth under the Obama administration. And so if we get the economy moving again, we'll see actual wage growth, which will mean more money in the pockets of Americans. So people won't just get a tax cut, they'll also see wages rise. They'll be more confident that their job will be around tomorrow, and there'll be a chance for real career advancement throughout every sector of our economy. And I think the best way to get there, Liz, is to cut taxes for everyone, but the most meaningful impact will have to be felt by the middle class for this to be a success in the Trump agenda.
Right, and I certainly think we agree on that, although I am a proponent of the 28% top rate like we saw under Ronald Reagan, so maybe tell your colleagues to consider that too. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on the show, sir. It was great to talk to you.
Always a pleasure.